Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Prez, and this is episode 340 or 346. 346. Yes. Wow, I'm losing count and I'm going senile in my old age. I am joined, as always, by my co-host Prez, that is at _Presidente on Twitter. Prez, how are you doing on this Thursday night?
I'm doing fantastic. I am watching Giannis rack him up and finally do his job and perform in a manner consistent with my first fantasy basketball pick. We had a pep talk after his underwhelming first couple of games, not even approaching 30 points per game, which is for shame. But he's got it together now, so all is well. Don't care if his team wins or loses.
I do care that his team loses tonight. That would be good for me. But that's it, everything's happened. But we are joined by, I think, his second time on the pod, if that's correct. His name is Tyler Wilson. He writes for The Swish Theory. Tyler, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Happy to be back. Yeah, this is my second time. I didn't get a call back for last season, so I guess the first one didn't go that well. But hopefully this one is, off to the races. I'm excited to be here.
Well, me and Prez were talking before, and I was like, I think last time he ccame on, we talked about Al Horford, and I was berating Al Horford, and you were like, I think Al Horford is fine. I don't have a reason to hate Al Horford. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. No, that's not what happened exactly. But before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. The first being that the Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. That is at the Strickland on Instagram. Post all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and you haven't done so already, please hit like, leave us a comment, and subscribe to the channel. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise available on our website. I'm wearing some of it. You can kind of see it on this very small pane here on the side. You can find that on our website, www.thestrick.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store. We got all kinds of cool stuff on there. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. Again, you can find that on our website. The Strickland finally has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, our newest podcast that is hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter. They grade your takes that you leave us in our Discord channel specifically for this purpose and evaluate them, judge you as people. So you get access to that. You also get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There is a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave that is even more. You also get access to Strictly NFL, our newest podcast. That is, guess what it is? It's an NFL podcast that is hosted by Constantine and Jeffrey Rasmussen. And you also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. This comes with a variety of additional benefits, like listening to pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly whenever you choose to subscribe. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without BetOnline. The last of the major pro sports leagues kicks off this week, and BetOnline is your top spot for all your NBA action this season. With MLB postseason, NFL, and college football, and NHL in full swing, BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. Get everything NBA at your fingertips with both desktop and mobile access for every sport anytime. Head to the BetOnline website today to get in on the action. Don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, enough of the capitalist shenanigans. The Knicks played the Spurs yesterday. A basketball game occurred, and the Knicks won. They emerged victorious. It was not a very competitive game. It was over. I don't think the Spurs are within. I don't think they got within single digits after like 6 minutes into the game. Maybe it might have been more than that. But it was Victor Wembenyama's debut MSG performance, which was very conveniently scheduled 39 days to the day after Michael Jordan's. No pressure, Victor. Just live up to that. We'll talk about the Knicks as a Knicks podcast, but we can talk about Victor first. I don't think he was like, I didn't view him as like, oh, he choked or something like that, but I did feel like it was very built up. It was like, I mean, I think in a lot of ways it was his first major kind of national TV regular season exposure in a way that it was like built up all day. It felt like, obviously New York is a bigger stage than I don't think he's played in LA yet, right? And
Okay,
he played.
killed by the Clippers.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
it was the
the
Clippers though, so it's kind of
Yeah,
like, is it Inglewood or is it LA? I don't know.
yeah. It doesn't. It's the Clippers, right? It's like the second team. Doesn't really count.
Doesn't
It's
feel
not.
the same.
Yeah, it's not really Los Angeles. But I just thought like it was just a lot going on, and he didn't seem like settled at any point in the game really until the end. And that's when he like actually looked decent. Obviously the game had also changed by that point. It was a total blowout. But what did you make of that, Tyler? Do you just think like, and I also think like he's a rookie, so there'll be rookie games, and he played against a front court that I think is a lot more physical and in ways that he probably just hasn't even experienced yet in the NBA.
Yeah, I think that the slow starts aren't out of the norm, I guess, to start the season. He's stated publicly that he finds it easier to play hard at the end of games, which I think is kind of funny coming from like a generational number one overall pick, where you're like, oh, it's like I have to start playing harder in the first three quarters, which you can see that on tape a lot of the time. More than anything, I think the team just against physicality in particular is going to struggle, and it's a little difficult to get a 7'3" guy the ball in space, the space necessary for him to dribble with the current roster construction. And the Knicks have a good defense. I just think that when this level of offense and encounters like a real defense, like the shit hits the fan really fast. And you saw that in the beginning of the game. That once it was 8-0 in the first 2 minutes, it was over. It was done. Like you could just tell that there was nothing going on offense. It wasn't going to happen. No Vassell, it hurts, but I don't know. Vic is awesome and it's great, and I struggle to care about what happens this season, I guess would be my take.
Yeah, I think Pop is also finding it very hard to care about what's happening based on a lot of his answers. We'll get to Pop later, but like, I mean, I don't actually know how to feel about this because I mean, I've watched I've caught the end of a few Spurs games, right? Like I caught like the end of both of their games against the Suns, and obviously I watched the entire game yesterday. I think I watched most of the second half when they played. Their opener was against the Mavericks, right? Yeah, so I watched most of that game. So like I've seen quite a bit of him and quite a bit of them, but I guess like I have seen people talking about like, oh, like they need a point guard, like they're not able to get the ball to Vic in areas that he needs it, and like I don't know if I really believe that because I'm like I don't know how much post work Vic is going to be capable of doing right now, and how much you even want him to do right now. And that's like seems to like you're like, oh, they don't have anybody that can throw a post entry. I'm like, well, one, like Trey Jones exists, he would just need to start, and I'm not sure why he's not starting. But like I don't know. Do you feel that way at all, or do you just think it's like, hey, like it's fine if we're not able to get the like it's not all on the guard. It's also like Vic's a 19-year-old, 20-year-old rookie or whatever, and he's running around here trying to figure out where to be also.
Yeah, I think that it's I'm not a bit. I like Trey Jones. I think Trey Jones is great. I understand what they're trying to do with the whole like so-handed point experiment to a degree. I think that a lot of Spurs fans just want to see them like spam like a 1-4, 1-5 pick and roll with Vic all game and just have him run a ton of pick and rolls and be like this crazy athletic big that can like plays in space. And a lot of the stuff that you want a traditional point guard to do, I'm not really concerned that he's not going to be able to do that next year, in 2 years, in 3 years. Like this is like the ripest stage of your developmental period, I guess, as like a 19-year-old first playing in the league. He's playing more games than he ever has, traveling more than he ever has. We're not going to win games this year. I have to disappoint Spurs fans on that. We're not going to win a ton of games, but you run out of time really quickly to be experimental and to try weird stuff and to see what fits. And you have the weirdest, most experimental player to exist in like NBA history. You might as well try to do some fun stuff. And the cost of that is it looks really ugly when it doesn't go well. But I'm not like I get why they're doing the Sohan thing. I think that like they have been obsessed with this like bigger point guard, non-traditional point guard for the last like 5 years plus. I mean, DeJounte Murray was drafted. I mean, and he played some point guard, but he always was more of a two. They kind of had to develop his on-ball reads. They drafted Josh Primo to be a 6'6" point guard, which went really well. And then now they've got now for the first time they have somebody who doesn't want to score when he has the ball as a point guard, and I think that's their new I guess thing, and I think that maybe will be more successful. We'll see, but I don't know. I think that it's going to be weird, and there's going to be some games where it looks really cool, and the defense is incredible, and they're getting out in transition. And I think a big part of the idea of building the roster and building this way with the big point guard is that you have the ultimate NBA event creator on your back line now, and he's on top of that going to be the best transition player in the NBA because he runs like a gazelle and he's 8 feet tall. So the idea of getting him into easier situations in the fast breaking offense and kind of dominating defense in that way is exciting and cool, but you have a bunch of 20-year-olds trying to do it. So I don't know. I get what they're doing, but it definitely leads to some ugly stuff. But I don't know, as a Spurs fan, how can you care, man? I'm still riding a high. This is great. This is so cool. We get to watch an alien for the next X amount of years. I don't know. I'm down to try some weird stuff for a while and see how it goes.
It's definitely worth experimenting. There's not. It's weird. It feels extra weird now because there's there's so few true rebuilds right now, right? It's the Spurs and the Wizards, and that's it, right? Am I missing somebody? Detroit, I guess.
Detroit doesn't count anymore. I mean, I guess maybe they're still in rebuilding, but it feels like they're kind of aging out of it at this point. I mean,
I think so too, and they got a couple of guys they spent money on.
Are we not counting Houston?
Well, Houston, I think they kind of they're not a true rebuild to me anymore, just because they spent a lot on vets who play a lot. So they're rebuilding, but I mean stage 0 rebuild. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, okay. So you mean the basement? Yeah.
Yeah,
rebuilding when you're playing Dylan Brooks over Tari Eason, I would say.
Give Chicago a year. I'll be right there.
I'll believe it when I see it, Shwin. No, but what I was gonna say is
Portland.
There we go. Portland, good call.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't even want to talk about fucking Portland until DA gets his act together for my fantasy team. But what I was gonna say is it's jarring to see experimentation like that right now when 95% of games are going to be teams who are trying to win and maybe they'll experiment a little bit here and there on the margins with play style, but for the most part guys have their roles. There's no funny weird shit going on. Coaches have goals that make sense, and there's a degree of optimization both team-wide and player-wide around the league because of the parity and the combination of every team would be the most analytically minded team of 4 years ago, every single team right now. So you're having even teams like the Wizards who can lose and score 135 points in a game or something like that, because offenses are just so good. So I get it, as far as it's I don't want to call it stealth tanking, the experimenting, because I do think you should see what you have with someone like Sohan. It's what, fuck it, let's just fucking throw him out there, right? What are we really losing, right? As long as you don't do that for the whole season. But the tricky thing I wanted to bring up to you, and we talked about this briefly on a Twitter DM, is how do you feel there's not much of a safety net, right? And I mean, they can trade, of course, right? I don't know, maybe they need vet presence and they decide to trade for Evan Fournier. Who can say? But there's say you decide the Sohan experiment doesn't work and you go with Trey Jones. Okay, he's more point guard experience than Sohan, but he's not gonna bend the defense, right? He's not gonna average 12 drives a game probably, and there's just not many fallback options with this roster. So how do you feel about that from a developmental perspective? Because just taking off your Spurs fan hat and putting on your Swish Theory draft analyst hat, to me that is always the most dangerous thing about young rebuilding rosters that are without even a little bit of like vet guardrails. It's like then it just becomes like a free for all, and some players can develop in that environment, and I don't doubt that Victor is one of them. But part of me is like, could he develop better if they, I don't know, traded for a DeLon Wright or some fucking random, you know what I mean? Like something like that.
Yeah, I think that is a tricky question to answer intelligently, I would say. That Vic is just, it's kind of astounding, and it doesn't totally make sense. Like, you watch his tape from 18 months ago and the things that he was doing in summer league and in the preseason and the beginning of the year is like this like big wing creator feels like insane. And like the quickness of the development of his ball skills has been pretty astounding. And like coming into the year, I would have said like, no, like run him as a 4, play him off ball. I don't want to see him dribble really ever, like, especially in the, like you saw him in summer league and he couldn't dribble in space at all. Like, he was just getting picked all the time. And then we enter the year and he's breaking guys down out of closeouts and like ISOing at like from the top of the key. It's like, it's wild. It's kind of nuts. And that kind of changed my perspective, at least in terms of the necessity of having more of like a table setter. Cause I think that you're going to get some ugly results this year, but the idea of just like opening the fire hose and like seeing how it goes became more appealing, seeing that like there was already improvement there and there's like an appetite for it. I think that they're asking a lot of him now. I mean, I think that offensively, the scoring, his usage isn't as much as you'd want, and it's not even necessarily getting in his spots. I don't even think that is the biggest deal. I think he gets buckets just by existing on the court. He's enormous and he has incredible touch. And as you see the team like in like the crunch time at the end of like the Phoenix games, and they're like force feeding the ball and making sure that he's actually able to get looks, that it looks a little bit different, and he can operate well, giving a ball and just be like, hey, go score, figure it out. Like, he was awesome doing that in to begin the year. So I don't know. Could he develop a little bit better, perhaps, but I think that the team has decided that like the way to build a competitive and like championship caliber roster is going to require some amount of like non-traditional basketball thought, I guess, in its construction, especially around Vic himself. And you could build more. I guess the argument it currently is like, should Trey Jones start? And to do what exactly? Like, I get that he can run a ton of pick and rolls and organize your offense a little bit better, but what is the value of developing pick and roll chemistry with a point guard that is not going to be your point guard in the future? Do we think that like that isn't the easiest thing for someone of like in his shoes to do, at least what we're going to ask him in like the long run? Like, I would like to see him have more lead time to develop his shot creation and on-ball skills as like a big wing, to see like if it works and to see how like what level we can get to. And
like,
I don't know, like
is Trey starting going to stop that though? Because I feel like what all you're doing is you're giving him like, I mean, look, I can only, as a Knicks fan who had to watch like the worst point guard play in the league for basically 20 years, like, I think one of the big costs, and obviously as a rebuilding team during most of that time, which maybe you as a Spurs fan not too familiar with, but like one of the costs and me and Prez have talked about this a lot, like one of the costs of not having a good point guard ever, especially when you sucked, was like, yeah, look, I mean, we're guys like Ntilikina, Knox, and whoever, we can name like 15 guys, right? Are those guys ever going to be good in any context? Maybe not. But like, when you don't have a guy who you can just kind of like depend on to organize an offense and just get you settled, it just creates this kind of like uncertainty that other guys have to pick up on. And I'm not saying like, oh my God, like Wemby's development is going to be utterly destroyed now because Trey Jones isn't starting, right? Obviously not. But I do think like there's a value of just like, hey, look, like we're still going to get this guy a ton of on-ball reps, even with Trey Jones on the floor, because Trey Jones is not like some high usage scorer or something, right? Like, he's just going to run his pick and rolls and make the right read, and that's about what he'll do. But like, I think there's a value to just getting him the reps and getting him kind of in a rhythm, right? Like, okay, I know that if he's struggling, he's 0 for 3 from the field or something, this guy can just get him at, an easy 16-footer, which is like his bread and butter shot, whatever. I don't even know what those bread and butter shot is, right? And I just think there is a value to that, which doesn't necessarily mean that like not doing it is some horrible development plan. I just, I don't know. I'm just like very into having boring veteran point guard play. Like hell, like even when we had Jared Jack, I was like, all right, thank God. Like we have a guy that just like knows how to run a pick and roll, and he can get Kristaps a shot when we absolutely just need Kristaps to get an easy shot. And like, I don't know. I think there is a value to that. What that is all very nebulous stuff, right? Like there's no way to define it or necessarily quantify it either.
Yeah, I would say that it was kind of hard to tell last night, given how awful the game was. But last year they played a really heavy driving kick system that they played since the DeJounte DeRozan days, really since like the Parker days, where it's just kind of like have your guard get into the paint and kick out and just have kind of people react off of that. And I think they've determined, or at least the decision has been like that is probably not the best offense in which to like maximize Vic in the long run, and that the idea being like a more set heavy offense where it's more scripted, but you're at least able to kind of like pick your spots and get into actions with a bigger defensive personnel. Like I understand that. And especially in the starting group, because like Vic and Trey play a ton of minutes together, and like Trey closes games a lot of the time. I think it's about a 50-50 split between the amount of minutes he plays with Sohan on the court at point and with Trey. And it's really, really difficult to defend teams' best lineups with Trey on the court, like period. He just can't cover ground that way. He's not exactly like a point of attack hound. He tries to be, but it's not been awesome. And he's small. And the idea that you're trying to force feed these lineups of your 5 best players, essentially getting Sohan, Keldon, and Vassell on a court together with Vic at the same time. And trying to do that against teams' best lineups to build some type of like defensive foundation that you can grow from is, to me, more sustainable than trying to like shoehorn an offense in starting lineups with Trey when you're still getting bench units with Trey. And like ideally that's going to be his role, and the players that he's going to be playing with are going to be more suited to his play style. I like when they close games with Vic at the 5 and they have those other 4 guys on the court, like it's awesome. It's super good. And I love that. But I do understand the idea of like trying to flesh out other more functional lineups, especially like with Sohan playing the point, and the idea that like you don't have anybody else on your team that can really defend the way that he can. And like, and I know Keldon's been trying more this year, but like that is our only real perimeter stopper on the court. And if anyone's going to go to the bench, it will be him. And it kind of neuters the general value of him. It kind of takes him out of the most valuable reps he's going to have, which is guarding Luka and guarding KD and guarding Booker in these big moments. So I do think there's some value to it. It would make me more nervous, I guess, if Trey wasn't playing much or if they had like a bad backup point guard. But like the idea that one of those other 4 guys around Vic gets subbed out with like an actual star or an actual like creator, and then you can kind of just like move everybody else down the line and still have these bench units with Trey, they're really functional. Like that is appealing. I think that's like the general goal, and they're okay to stomach that for a year, which like, again, as a Spurs fan, like I'm fine with that. Like it's cool. We won a lot, and it's gonna be good for a while. And I think we have a ton of draft capital, and figuring out like what is gonna work and like how to make your ideal vision work is probably worth a longer experimentation than people maybe have stomach for.
Keep that seat warm for Isaiah Collier.
You see, Collier would be awesome. That's like my dream. I mean, like Ron Holland would be great too. I think they like the idea of having some type of like paint touch wing to be able to kind of piece things together. But man, he's the guy, dude. He's awesome.
We'll spare Shwin and wait till March Madness for that.
I could talk about Collier all day, dude. I thought about it way too much. It's terrible. I had to stop watching tape.
I have never heard of his name until just now. If to bring it back to the NBA, so like with that being said, is Keldon Johnson like, what was going on with him yesterday? Because I think that's about one of the worst games I've seen from. He just did so much weird shit in that game where it felt like he had one play where he just stopped looking at the ball. Like it was just like obvious the ball was going to be past him and he just looked the other way. It was a very weird performance from him. Like, how has he been this year? Because I do feel like this is kind of his extension just kicked in, right? This is the first year of extension.
Yes, his first year.
Yeah. Like, so this is kind of like a big year for him. And I remember I was listening to the broadcast on their opening game against the Mavs, and like, I don't remember the exact anecdote, but it was basically like, Pop sat him and Devin Vassell down after the season or something and was like, hey, so our defense was really bad, and you two were the biggest reasons why it was really fucking bad. So we need to work on that. I guess, how is that project going? Because from what I saw yesterday, I mean, Vassell he may as well have not played, right? But for what I saw from Keldon, I was like, I don't know. I was just like, I remember him as a rookie and being like, man, this kid has so much promise as a defender. And now I'm watching him and I'm like, it feels like it's the same mistakes he makes a lot of the times. And I'm just kind of like, generally, like, where are things with him? How are you feeling early in the season, admittedly?
Yeah, I think you got the worst two Keldon games of the year so far in that Dallas game and this most recent one. He's the growth as a driver and like passer out of like options has been really exciting. And I think that like he's always been kind of this like head down, like bull in a china shop style driver. And there's still moments of that. And you saw that at the end of the Mavs game too, which was awful. I hated that. But he's been a lot better about keeping his head up and making passes. I think he leads the team in potential assists. Like he's
I mean, he even had 8 assists yesterday.
yeah, I mean, that has been the most encouraging thing. I don't know what's going on with the shot, man. Like he went through this phase of like remarkable growth and was like that sustained for like 6 months and now has just like totally gone in the tank. Obviously he's not getting like the best catch and shoot looks in the world, but I don't really have any confidence when he shoots threes anymore, which is like kind of shocking where we were like last year at the beginning of the year.
He had a high. He was like putting them up last year.
Yeah, I can't remember how many attempts a game it was, but like his growth between like the first like 4 years of his career was just like astounding in his 3-point shooting. And yeah, he was in like a worse role last year and took a lot of off the dribble stuff, but it's just it hasn't been the same. I really don't know how else to describe it. Like his form's kind of reverted back to a little more of like a shot putty, like off to the side. And I don't know, it's that has been kind of weird. The defense, I mean, peep my first appearance on the Strickland where I talked for like 10 minutes about how awful our wing and forward defense has been for like half a decade. And yeah, they were really bad last year. And I think that like Devin, it's a lot easier to kind of project defensive value because that's what he was drafted on and has shown you that. Keldon has never been much of a team defense guy. Is not going to be like a head on a swivel, make rotations and do stuff. But he's at least been better in man. He's a little bit lighter, and he is like staying up on guys, and isn't like one of the worst defenders in the league this year. I would say.
How come y'all bring back all these dudes, but y'all don't bring back Bruce Bowen to teach motherfuckers how to like get under people's shirt and karate kick people in the face?
Dude, Bruce Bowen, I don't know what the relationship is with Bruce Bowen. I think there's a little bit of like a little bit of beef. I know he still on the Clippers broadcast? Is he not doing that anymore? I can't remember.
I literally had no idea he was a broadcaster.
I know. Yeah, he was on the Clippers broadcast. I know he said some stuff about Kawhi during that situation, so it's been a little bit on ice with Bruce. But I know we it's been ugly, man. I think that's the entering the year. I thought like, oh, I can't wait. Hopefully, we can find some like star point guard that's gonna like save the day. And it's like, man, I really just want a 3 that plays both ways and really can defend and really like make shots and get 2 feet in the paint, do something. But I don't know. I like Keldon a lot. I think he's really fun. I think he's probably the best suited to come off the bench in the long run. It's maybe just a little bit too early in the time horizon for that to happen, or at least the roster's not talented enough for him to be placed into that role. But I just kind of, I don't know. Maybe I'm pessimistic at this point, but I do struggle to see how he's like a starter in like one of the 5 best or one of the like I don't know impactful starters on like a championship team, just because the defense is I don't know.
It's very Space Cadet-y.
Yeah, it's just exactly.
He's like the thing that's so these are always the most like confounding defenders to me, or like he's not like he's got a good frame, he's strong or should be strong, and like he is strong when he drives to the rim, right? Like you see him like kind of be willing to challenge guys, but like yesterday I'm watching him and I'm like he's just like when you're guiding somebody to the rim instead of like trying to actually obstruct them from getting to the rim. That's what I saw him do on more than one time. And honestly, like I have not watched the Spurs nearly close enough. And I definitely have not particularly watched Vassell, but I saw like a few times yesterday where it was like Vassell's like, you're not like watching it like that's terrible defense because you're out of position. It's like, that's terrible defense because you're just like letting the guy do what he wants to do and mirroring him, but not actually trying to like contain him or defend him. But I mean, Keldon's stuff was just a lot worse too, because there was some weird like off ball lack of understanding of where he was supposed to be and shit that you're like, why is that happening right now? That was like a basic screen. I think it's pretty obvious where he should be.